Okay, hi everyone. This video will be about the structure of a paper. Now, this will be a very broad structure that you can use for any paper, but of course, do keep in mind that every assignment or every type of paper or thesis all have different kind of rules on the structure. For example, your teacher wants to write in a certain way or go in depth on a certain theory or something like that. Then of course you need to adapt your structure to fulfill those requirements. So I'm just basically telling you the general structure that you can use for a paper, and hopefully it will give you a bit of insight on what kind of structures to use. So basically, structure, what does it consist of? The title, of course. Don't use the research question if you're going to use a research question. Don't write the research question on the front of the paper. Rather, write something. So, for example, if you would have as research question, what is the effect of collaborative learning on cognitive development? Then you can just say the effect of collaborative learning on cognitive development. So not as a question, rather just have like the cause and effect as title. You can also just use study assignment 2 and then the topic it is. But yeah, there are no strict requirements on that. You can just be very broad about that. Of course, the introduction, we'll go in depth on that right after this slide. The core, which is that I have conclusion, discussion, and the reference list in the end, which is discussed in another video. But yeah, let's just go in depth on the introduction, the core, conclusion, and discussion. If I can make this work there. So the introduction is, as is in the name, focused on the introduction of the problem area or topic you want to discuss, obviously. But here it is very important that you integrate all the information and all the sources that the reader needs to know before going in depth on the topic that you're going to discuss about. So which is something that I recommend in general whenever you write a paper. Always keep the reader in mind. Like, what do they need to know? So this can be just general information, like what is the topic, etc., etc. But it can also be definitions, for example. So because there are many theories and topics that use very specific lingo or very specific terms. So it is important to mention these in the introduction before you go in depth on them. So yeah, to introduce the reader to this, you have to include the relevant theory. Of course, you're gonna introduce that here. You would go more in depth on that in the core, or have a separate part called theory, but it depends on the assignment that you're gonna write. Previous research studies, like what is the reason why you started writing this paper, like what has been done before and what's led you to writing this. Definitions, what I just mentioned, and why is it so important to look at this area, both for practice and research. And with practice, I mean, like, why is it important that teachers, for example, could include this theory or could include or like how does the information that your paper is about, but how does that potentially affect the educational setting or the way you teach, for example, or the methods. And with research, I mean, like this is mainly relevant to the thesis, like the final thesis, because your thesis has to add something new to research. Like, why are you looking into this, and how can this add to what is already known? This you will follow with why you want to have a look at this. So, like at the end of the introduction, you would introduce the research questions. So you just mentioned, like, for example, little research has been done about collaborative learning or cognitive development in a geography setting. I'm just making something up. So that's why the reason why you want to write about that right now. You can you can introduce a research question like, okay, and that's why why the paper has as research question yada yada yada. But I recommend, maybe even strongly recommend, to really have the to have like an implicit like, but it's still lacking on this and this and this. This paper will therefore look into the effect of A on B in the C setting. Yeah, and then also briefly mention how you will try to get an answer to your problem area and what topics you will discuss and why. Just for the people who are reading this and think it in relation to their final thesis, for your thesis it has, you would have different kind of setups or different kind of structures. So you can write me about that on how to do that. But this is just mainly general structure. So in the core and the body, this is where you really go in depth. Like you are allowed to sort of split it up into theory or split it up into methods. But yeah, overall you have like a big core, and this is where you really go in depth. Yeah, depending on assignments, paragraph titles or like part titles. It always looks nice if you have that. But don't do it too often, otherwise it really looks like separate blocks and you kind of lose the cohesion in your paper. So first alinea of every paragraph briefly, or first paragraph of every alinea. This, like the term paragraph and alinea already has like depending on where you're from or what your native language is, you can have different interpretations. For example, paragraph in Dutch means like the whole, like a separate part, but a paragraph in English is just the smallest collection of a few sentences that has a certain idea. So do keep in mind that that this could be different. But yeah, like if even if it's like a big part or a big paragraph or a small paragraph, you would always usually start off with just a sentence that sort of introduces the idea of that part, so what it is about. So yeah, so after the introduction or introductory alinea, so the first alinea that you use, you will also start out with the following, like why are you discussing this subtopic? What did previous research show? What were their results? Of course, you mentioned that briefly in the introduction, but this is where you go more in depth. What is your evaluation of the results? Yeah, no, I think. Like, do keep in mind that you have to write third person or just very neutral throughout the paper. Also mentioned in the previous video. What is the relation between this paragraph and the overall topic of the paper? Because that's something that you should keep in your mind whenever you write a paper. That you should always think like how does this part add to the purpose of the paper? Because if it doesn't serve any purpose to your research question or the assignment, then there's no use of mentioning that. And then at the end of the at the end of the paragraph, you would give like or the end of the part, you would give a small paragraph with a small conclusion, and this you could just sort of give a very small summary of what you just described, and you can connect it to the connect that to the theory or the research paper or the research question. And you could even give suggestions for future research here, but I rather recommend doing that in the conclusion. Yeah, this you repeat depending on how many areas you want to discuss. So in your conclusion and discussion, this is basically where you round everything up, give a conclusion, and then add with a discussion. So yeah, basically the conclusion, you can just give a small summary of your most important findings, and then describe what does this mean? How does this relate to practice or research? Like what I just mentioned in the introduction, that's where you start writing, okay, this could potentially change the way of teaching, or this could add a lot of extra value to the research in this area. But in the conclusion and discussion, you would answer this like, yeah, this does in fact change, could have a great impact on teaching, or add a lot of value to research, and could indicate further, or with this you can recommend further research on this. So you do this by summarizing all the important paragraph conclusions. Try not to copy paste, but make it into easy to read text. That's something that you should do throughout the paper. Yeah, like I just mentioned, when you get like clear findings, your interpretation, do keep connected to the theory that you're using, evaluation of the found answer, suggestions for future research, and then you could end with the wider context of results conclusion. What could be done now? Now that we know this, and then and then you're basically done. That's it. And then the reference list in the end, which I described in the previous video. And and then just about paragraphs in general, because paragraphs are just the small parts of any idea. So like a big, like a part in your paper can have separate paragraphs, but every paragraph should have one specific idea or message. So you can basically write these in two ways. Like I personally recommend to start off with a sentence that basically says the main idea. So you can say, but not only does collaborative learning add value to cognitive development, and then you describe, what else it could also have an impact on, or maybe rephrase this like. But collaborative learning also has an influence on, let's say just cognitive development again. And then you just describe why, you put in sources and give good arguments with the proper sources, and then your main idea is that. And you can already see that from the first sentence. And but you can also do it like the other way around. So you can start off with recently research has been done on blah 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 blah. Furthermore, other research says that, and then the last sentence could be the final idea, which could be therefore it is important that collaborative learning should be integrated in the classroom due to cognitive development. Like when you read other papers or anything, have a look at it and think of or try to identify these structures. Chapters in books aren't really recommended on that, but like rather find some academic research or journals that use this structure. And hopefully this video helped you out a bit. Hope it wasn't too confusing. And again, it's a general description of how you could integrate this structure. So of course it depends on assignments or type of paper that you're writing, that you should adapt your structures to that. But just a general idea. I hope it helped. And thank you for watching. Bye bye.